Please help me in your pronunciation of your name, because I don't. It's Shabna.
Shobna.
Shabna. All right. Thank you so much for joining me, ladies. Like I said, the conversation is around work meets the creator economy, a very, very interesting one, especially with the rise of social media and now having to build personal branding. And I'm going to start with you, Nadia. Just to start off the conversation, how is the rise of the creator economy blurring the traditional boundaries of between professional employment as well as personal entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I am very lucky and privileged to work in the international tech space. So I work in a tech SaaS company, and I've done so for the last decade. And I think internationally, it is far ahead Africa at the moment. However, if you look at developing countries like Brazil, Southeast Asia, India, those countries have actually seen a huge rise in creators, especially mobile creators, right? And so I think, one, the opportunity is massive, but our labor law in South Africa is completely, like the lines are completely blurred at this moment.
Yes.
And it's a completely gray area with a massive opportunity. While I was preparing for this, I was just doing basic research. A nice segue from Mark. I used Notebook LM to prepare all my research today.
Oh,
well. But Goldman Sachs highlighted that the creator economy in 2023, had a $250 billion environment, right? In 2027, that will be double. And so the opportunity is absolutely massive, not just for individuals, but specifically for companies. That means all of you, right?
all right.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for that. And I like the fact that you spoke about the law and the policies in South Africa have not gone there yet. But we'll get into that in just a moment. Just want to get to Shalpna right now. So what opportunities does an employee-driven content creation present for organizations? Because I think organizations are starting to think, okay, if you're going to be doing this, how is it benefiting us?
Exactly. So firstly, good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me. So, I mean, if you think about employee-generated content, there's so many different aspects of it. But, I mean, I'll touch specifically on employee-generated content, that employees are putting out there on their own social media accounts, on different platforms, about the corporate brand.
Yeah.
So how do you use that as an organization? I mean, if you think about it, an employee is now creating their own authentic storytelling, using their own way and, sharing their influence around their day, the culture, what's happening in the corporate, sharing their personal experience about the products or the services. So it's authentic, and authenticity builds trust.
Yes.
So in that way, as a corporate, one, you're getting the employees' own social networks, which is now multiplying your own corporate network, which you may not have been able to touch. And therefore, you're multiplying that, and you're getting even more engagement. There was actually a MIT Sloan review in 2024 that pointed out that, with employee-generated content, there's actually 8 times more engagement than a corporate brand or corporate, content that's out there. So, I mean, again, if you think about that, if employees are putting it out there, you're getting multiple networks that are out there. You're increasing engagement. The other thing that's going to follow on from that is talent attraction. You're going to be employing or getting employees or potential employees who are more aligned with your values. They're seeing what's out there, and therefore you're going to build that.
Yeah.
And actually, LinkedIn's 2024 Employer Brand Report noted that companies that have employee advocacy programs actually had 3 times more roles being filled than others. So again, it all leads to that. I mean, I'll mention one last one because there's a lot of opportunities, but I'll stick to one last one. It's a cost-effective marketing strategy.
Yes, very true.
Which your CFO will like.
Very true. All right, so Nadia, you spoke about policies and our labor policies just not having the creator economy in there. So I just want to find out if now companies find that they have employees creating content, whether it's for their own personal branding or if it goes hand in hand with the organization. So how can organizations or even companies now start to craft policies that protect intellectual property as well as brand integrity while still empowering employees to build their own personal brands?
I'm not a policy builder, right? I build guidelines for organizations to keep people really safe. So as head of people in a global company, my role is probably very different from anyone in a local environment. And so how I look at these things is start thinking about the most simple way, right, to protect the company. And if I had to break that into three things, I would say, one, I need to obviously protect the company's IP.
Yeah.
And so that has to be in there. The second thing is I need to protect all our, whether that's candidate or vendor data or anyone's data. And thirdly, we need to protect the employee themselves. So I look at it from both the company and the employee perspective. I would start in a very simple fashion to start building a foundational policy to say, look, you can share absolutely anything about our product as long as it doesn't fall into these 3 or 5 or whatever your organization decides in terms of those categories are. And I think tactically, it's very easy to start thinking about it in a simple way instead of boiling the ocean and trying to change legislation at a labor level, right? And so it's really about looking at the company. I don't know if anyone knows this about me, but I build a lot of open source material for all the companies I work at, right? And in a little while, we'll have our entire company handbook publicly available. This is not just a public handbook. This is the internal handbook that we're just going to make publicly available, right? And so it's taking single source of truth and making it open. And when you look at what is in that, none of that has to be a secret, right? The accessibility of it means anyone should be able to read it. It will amplify our employer brand. It will attract a very different candidate that really cares about that hyper transparency.
Yeah.
But it's a huge opportunity. And if you start looking at what is in your, hopefully, internal handbooks or documentation, you'll realize there isn't that much to hide. There's actually a huge opportunity to provide access, to inspire other small entrepreneurs, companies starting up, students just coming out of university or a technicon or technical college. And I think we tend to, in an HR role, over policy things instead of really breaking it down to bare bones. What is those 3 to 5 things they can't do? And start with that. I think it's going to be a learning journey. Many people are going to share things they probably shouldn't. I have the best CEO in the world that often leaks before we even launch a product. And so you get so excited about the things we built, but it's also done us a great opportunity. It's also got us ahead of launches and features on our product at the company I work at. So I think the opportunity is not everything has to be behind a policy gate. Figure out what is those things that you want to protect and stick to that.
Fantastic. So now I'm just going to go to you, Sharpna. So in what ways can organizations then turn employee influence as well as digital visibility into a strategic advantage rather than seeing it as a reputational threat? Because we've seen a lot of times on social media, we have creators, whether on TikTok or on Instagram, share some things, and just because they work under a particular company, then the company sees that as a reputational threat. So how can they then use their influence just so that they can use it as strategic way, in a very strategic way, yeah.
And I think it boils down to what Nadia is saying. You need guidelines. That's it. You need to have the guidelines in place. And if your guidelines also include, these are the red list of things that we cannot talk about, that needs to come in. But it's also about enabling employees to say, okay, here's the policy, here's the guidelines.
Yes.
Training employees on your brand. What are your brand guidelines? What's your brand identity? What can you use? What can't you use? If you create a brand playbook that employees can use to know exactly this is how it should be, this is the look and feel, the tone, the visuals, all of that. That empowers employees to do and say the right things. You could even, as a company, implement pre-approval of content if you're really, really, just starting out the gates,
Yeah.
and you're not sure where your employees are at, you could introduce that. So I think there's a lot that companies can do, but training and empowering your employees, start off there.
All right, so training and empowering employees to be able to, bring the brand as well as the organization into a good light. All right, that's fantastic. So I like the fact that you'll be speaking about employee content, and this would be like an employee probably speaking about the organization and also bringing the influence to social media. But now let's talk about, I work for a particular company, I have a side hustle or I have a side business, and knowing that in this economy, which we like to call the cereals economy, things are not like we're trying to patch things. We also want to do work as well as passion. But now how can organizations, especially the leadership teams, now approach when someone in the company is now trying to monetize in a different way on social media or by starting their own business? How can we now start to approach that?
I'll start, and please chip in anytime. This isn't new. It's not a new thing. It's been going on for years, and I'll give you a very, very good example. If you look at white heterosexual men, right, in the tech industry, in any corporate industry, etc., they sit on multiple boards. They have multiple income streams. They have access to so many opportunities. I feel like the network that they're in is gigantic, but why can no one else do that?
Yeah.
And so how I view this is through a very interesting story. I worked with a chief marketing officer, Elisa Rossi, Italian. I was here in South Africa, VP of People, and we worked together on the entire building a startup, remote.com, very well-known employer of record. And while Elisa was working there, Elisa started an Italian handbag manufacturing company, only using local artisans, local sources in Italy. And the product is called By Milana, right? So by Milan, Milan in the location in Italy.
Yeah.
And she started this handbag company. She told the CEO that she was starting the company. Joop, still the CEO at Remote, was very supportive and highlighted that more women should have more side gigs and more opportunities. To me, I feel like all people should have more opportunity to have multi-income streams. And in South Africa, I see the opportunity as so much larger. There are so many single-parent households that do not have access to enough money to even pay their current expenses, school fees, food, basic things, right? And so I think instead of thinking about preventing it, I'd like to inspire, hopefully, CEOs that's in the room, or people that can inspire their CEOs, to really consider how this can turn into an opportunity, not just for the individual, but also for the company. And so having that dual value person that has this side gig and allowing them to explore that and to start measuring impact and results over time in the office, or tracking time, I think that's something I've been advocating for a really long time. I think you're going to transform how the person also thinks about work.
Yeah.
When you're allowed to do something, when you have all this flexibility, you're going to do anything for that not to go away. And so the trust factor does increase. There are hundreds of thousands of organizations already running like this in my world, right? And I understand that's a privilege, but bringing that back into a very simple organization to say, I don't mind what you do in your free time. Your work shouldn't be your life, right? It should be something you're very passionate about, care deeply about, and have an impact on. But if you need a second income stream, what is that, and how are you going to separate the two? And if there's an opportunity to blend, you do have that dual value as a company. You have the person adding value in their job and potentially talking about the company or brand and attracting customers in that way. And so I do see that in that way. And Elisa's story actually meant that many of our other women at remote.com really did become even investors. They started through AngelList or whatever, and they started becoming investors as very young individuals in the workspace. So I think it should be normalized.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely should be normalized. I think it's the practical applications for companies,
Yeah. Yes.
If you in a time-based organization, for example, you are selling time. So when is the employee doing their side hustle versus when are they doing company time? So I think a lot of that, are questions that companies have, and how do you put that practically in place? And it comes, like you said, with declaration upfront declaration to say, these are what my interests are. Does it, in any way, does the company have any issue with that in terms of this is going to affect company reputation or, is a competition with the company? So, putting in place those guidelines where either a risk committee or HR together with legal reviews those declarations on an annual basis.
Yeah.
To say, okay, look, this, yes, we're happy with this we're not happy with. And then, I guess also in your employment contract, just making sure that it's very clear as to this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. And just being very clear about all those guidelines and policies.
All right, fantastic. I've even heard of a term called moonlighting, which is basically you cannot work for a different company or start a side hustle. So let's say that someone in the room, probably watching online, has signed a contract of that kind and now wants to start a side hustle and now wants to have a conversation with HR on that. How do they start that conversation?
Great question. I think transparency and positive intent is probably like the most important thing. If you're going to do this in a secret and you know the company is against it, you can't expect a positive outcome. And so I think it's really about, first and foremost, having the hard conversation about the fact that you want to do this. If the company pushes back or genuinely just says no, I think you need to establish whether that's that's the kind of company you want to stay in at. Companies, Sharpna, you mentioned earlier, companies are attracting way more talent. I mean, on a daily basis, we get 3,000 applications. Our roles are so rare because we're a remote distributed company, right? So I understand the rareness of it, but it is also because there's this massive attraction to flexibility, autonomy, nonlinear work, etc. And so I just think you are going to lose, if you're an employer thinking about this, you are also going to lose that talent, that opportunity, and the individual will need to make a decision whether that's the right kind of company that they associate themselves with. I'll add, they will start seeking international opportunities, and that is allowing this, working distributedly in my fashion, so remotely. And so that's something to really consider before you just give it a hard no.
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. So now speaking on that and just jumping into that, so obviously we're here with HR professionals. Let's say it's a company that has never done it before or allowing someone to have their entrepreneurial passions or side hustles or even as a creator on social media. So now how can they start building a culture that actually celebrates that and also encouraging those that want to have businesses or different streams of income? How can they start to build that culture and encourage their employees to do so?
I think it really starts with what is your organizational structure? What is your operating model? Start there. Figure out, like, do we need to evolve our company values or our core mission, right, to make that more flexible or broader? But I also think earlier, again, great segue into learning and development. If you start thinking about even hiring creators or developing the people to becoming creators internally, you will change the way knowledge is shared. The access in the company that you create is going to transform. It's not just about ring lights and, face products, the world of creators. It's really about the authenticity of how you sell something. Yeah. If you all have an HR tech product and your chief people officer or your head of people or even your talent acquisition partner or recruiter can really become one of your thought leaders. It can become that face, that PR opportunity for them to show how they're using your product or talk about a problem they solved, and the product is secondary, but that becomes a sale. I was at a German conference many years ago, and Remote had used me to be that face. And I think I closed 6 sales deals at a dinner, right? Just because I was talking about the problems the same companies was trying to solve. I wasn't there in a sales capacity. but they pitched me as that face, right? And so I think that's the opportunity. It's really about start with who do you have, what product, what problem are you solving in your product and company, and can your people team or your recruiter, etc., like be that creator.
Fantastic. Sharpna, you want to close it off?
Yeah, and I think, in creating the culture in a company for the creator economy, there's got to be openness, right, from the top all the way down. So you've got to create that culture of openness and the transparency, like we said, disclosure upfront, disclose that these are my interests. And there's also got to be that alignment between the business outcomes and the KPIs. And the more a company can see these are the business KPIs that we are working towards, how then can we create, dual value creation? So what is it that employees can be doing as a side hustle on the creator economy, but that also serves our purpose? And then put in place those policies and those guidelines that can make it easier for employees to do everything. And also if you're aligning it to incentives, and creating platforms for employees to engage. So either on your website, you've got a space for all employees to provide their own content. And I'll just finish off with one example that I saw of a Norwegian fashion company. The way that they got all the employees into this was to create a store competition where they all had to put up, all these things on Instagram, and then the store that won got like gift cards and things like that. But what it created was increased sales, increased engagement, and also the stores got to know each other a little bit better. So, it's creating all of those opportunities to create more around that.
That's fantastic. Nadia, you said the economy is at how much?
Currently, I think it's on $250 billion.
$250 billion.
Yeah.
All right, so there's a huge opportunity in the creative space, and especially if it is done well with the company as well as the employee actually doing a dual or great partnership together. All right, thank you very much. I really think that was a great conversation to have, a very important one, especially as someone who is in both. So definitely a great conversation. So thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Sharpna. Let's give them a huge round of applause for that. Thank you very much.